Alright everyone, we start off today with Biden's no good, very bad day. He suffered a double whammy, literally yesterday. Technically there's a third story, the one with Mayorkas, that's also part of the dog pile. But I think the big ones, number one was the OPEC scandal. And then not too many hours later you got the new inflation report. U.S. inflation remains about the same. It ticked down by 1/10 of a point, which is worse than expected. They expected it to go down by 0.2, 0.3 or something, so it missed the benchmark. It remains high, and if you look at it year over year, it means that inflation technically is still rising, albeit slowly. That's the good news. Inflation has slowed down. Yeah, it's still going up and people still keep paying more and more. We're about to see legendarily higher gas prices potentially too because of the OPEC thing where Biden failed a fucking again. He had 2 double doozies in a day, and then a floozy, I suppose, with the Mayorkas story. Of course, we'll just throw that one in briefly here. Mayorkas, the DHS secretary that he appointed, lied knowingly to the American people with regards to the whole horsewhipping incident. You remember when the Haitian migrants were there scrambling up the riverbank, and the legacy media and Biden and all the others said, well, they're whipping the migrants. This is basically the return of slavery. Look at all these Klan members here whipping these black people. And that never actually happened. It was pointed out within 5 fucking minutes that there were no whips actually there, and that it was the reins on the horses, and they're swinging them around to keep them from getting grabbed by people so that they can't veer off their horses or something like that. It's fairly standard. I didn't know this until it was explained to me myself, because I've never ridden a horse in my life. I have no interest in equestrian sort of things. I don't like the equestrian. I'm rather pedestrian. I just want to go hiking and shit. But that's just part of his bad day. That was the news that the DHS secretary knowingly lied to the U.S. public, and we know that because he was apparently warned several hours before his presser, where he reacted and called it horrific and said that this shouldn't be happening. They're whipping the brown people, and this is terrible, and we need to look into this and maybe fire some people. He knew that. That's the third bad story of the day. That's the third wheel fucking story. Inflation remains high, and then you have what I think is the main scandalous story of yesterday, but it didn't get as much coverage as inflation, which is the OPEC scandal. Joe Biden attempted to coerce a foreign state into keeping the oil prices low for an extra month through the midterms so that it wouldn't cause political damage to his political party. He attempted to coerce the Saudi Arabians in the way that Trump usually erroneously gets blamed for coercing foreign states. You know how Trump was trying to get them to investigate their investigator in Ukraine and said, well, maybe we shouldn't be sending aid to this corrupt nation if it's engaged in business shenanigans and won't investigate things. And he was considered to have violated laws because he did this. It's punitive because Hunter Biden was involved in Ukraine. And terrible, terrible. Biden literally did this and tied it into potentially military aid packaging for the Saudi Arabians. They've talked about this. They had to issue an actual presser from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to address this, totally dropping Biden like a hot potato politically here and saying, look, he's asking us, we're being advised to push back the date by a month, which is totally not conspicuous regarding what happens literally next month at exactly the same time. But we're not going to do that because we think it'd be harmful to our member states. We want more money, so we're going to drill out less oil, and the oil we are selling will be worth more. It's basic economics. By the way, I'd like to point out something else that some people are missing. They're not seeing the forest for the trees. The U.S. President would not have had to beg the Saudi Arabians to do this if we just had a sane energy policy at home. If the United States were still drilling, issuing the permits, if it were still engaged in that behavior, if you had Keystone, etc., etc., if you didn't have refineries being backlogged by lockdownerism, etc., you wouldn't have the fuel problem that you have in the United States. And we'd be more able to sell gas to the Europeans at a lower price too. Europe would not be entering a hard recession right now if it weren't for U.S. energy policy. We could pick up the slack and make huge amounts of money doing it while forcing Russia potentially into an economic corner. All of the current major problems that we have, recession, gas and oil prices of course, Europe's problems, the war in Ukraine, would have been perfectly fine if Joe Biden hadn't decided on day one to fuck around with the U.S. energy industry and to tell governors, especially in blue states, continue the lockdowns for an onerous period of time. And attempting to get foreign states to do that too. There's a lot of cross-cultural coercion these days, you may have noticed. New Zealand's really in on that when it comes to net censorship, you may have noticed. This was a double and almost triple whammy day for Joe Biden. Both of these reports, the final inflation report you get before the midterm voting happens. I think the next one is a couple days after the midterms, if I remember correctly. That's not good. So you've got negative economic news. You're less than 4 weeks from the midterms. October surprise, everyone. Bidenomics sucks, and the Fed's interest rate hikes haven't so far curbed inflation. They're just threatening to cause higher unemployment. Now they're pivoting to trying to blame OPEC and or the Fed for a world recession, by the way. But it'll be mainly due to lockdowns and U.S. energy policy, at least on that side of the pond. It'll be due to lockdownerism and the war in Ukraine here in Europe and the shitty reactions that some of the European states have had to that particular struggle. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when you think about it. Yeah, I know our population can't heat their homes this winter, but it's for a good cause. We're continuing to get people in other countries to suffer under war conditions, but we're making a point. We're making a point that we can still do diplomatic stuff. Basically what it is. Inflation takes the cake for the big story of the day in the public's mind. That's because people vote with their wallets, which is, by the way, not what Biden wants them to do. He wants them, in some cases, to vote with their wombs. But the bigger one, really, is the OPEC scandal. That's impeachable. You can't impeach a person once the GOP takes the House, as it will in the midterms. There's no longer any real confusion about that. It'll probably be 30, 35 seats, by the way. It'll be a significant margin. They can impeach him for attempting to coerce a foreign state to influence the U.S. election. And I suspect that they actually will have the balls to do so. The new crop of Republicans will be largely MAGA, so it's a little bit different from the neocons of yesteryear. So just calm down and let them hopefully do their job. We'll hold their toes to the fire if they don't, by the way. People are getting more into that. There's a little more civic awareness these days. It's more exciting and it's better for the country. You can't impeach him for the inflation numbers. You can potentially do that for his shitty energy policy. You can concoct some reason why he did something quasi-legal, or you think it's treasonous or whatever. Just try to get him out of the way. But it's a long shot. The OPEC scandal is the bigger news. And so, of course, the legacy media is not covering it as much. They begrudgingly talk about inflation. Half of their reporting is, well, inflation is down. Yay! Bidenflation has gone away. But it hasn't. It hasn't fallen. It's not how the numbers calculated. It's the year-over-year numbers that matter. But don't expect to see that from MSNBC. I don't even know if they have an inflation report story on their front page at the moment. I'm not going to bother checking because their site is so primitively designed. It was created by morons. That's about all. Peace out.